How to speak English fluently. There was once a young woman named Sarah who lived in a small town. She had always dreamed of speaking English fluently. Sarah loved the sound of the language and wanted to travel the world, meet new people, and talk to them easily in English. However, every time she tried to speak, she felt shy and unsure of herself. Her words came out slow, and she worried about making mistakes. One day, Sarah decided she would no longer be afraid. She wanted to become fluent in English, no matter how difficult it seemed, so she made a plan. The first step was simple. She needed to listen more. She knew that babies learn to speak by listening, so she began to listen to English as much as she could. She watched English TV shows, listened to English music, and even tried to watch movies with subtitles. At first, it was hard. Sarah couldn't understand everything, but she didn't give up. She learned to pick out small words and phrases she knew, and slowly, they started making sense. She realized that it wasn't important to understand every word. What mattered was understanding the general meaning. After a few weeks, Sarah noticed something amazing. She started to recognize words she had heard many times before. She could understand simple conversations, and even though she couldn't speak fluently yet, she felt more confident. This small success made her feel excited. She knew she was on the right path. Next, Sarah decided to practice speaking, but where could she practice? There weren't many people in her town who spoke English. Then she had an idea. She would talk to herself in English. It sounded funny at first, but it worked. She started speaking about her day, describing what she was doing, and asking herself questions in English. By doing this, she became more comfortable with speaking out loud. One afternoon, Sarah visited a local cafe where tourists often came. She sat near a group of people who were speaking English. Her heart raced. Should she try to talk to them? What if she made mistakes? She reminded herself of the promise she made. She would no longer be afraid. So, with a deep breath, she walked over to their table and said, "Hi, I'm Sarah. Can I join you?" The group smiled and welcomed her. Sarah felt nervous, but she started speaking in English. At first, her words were slow, and she paused often. But the people were kind and patient. They listened and even helped her when she didn't know a word. Sarah realized that people didn't mind if she made mistakes. They cared more about what she was trying to say. From that day, Sarah made it a habit to speak with anyone who spoke English. She would go to the cafe or the park and try to find people to practice with. Every conversation helped her grow, and every mistake taught her something new. However, Sarah knew there was still a long way to go before she could be fluent. But now she had a plan, and most importantly, she had courage. She understood that becoming fluent in English was not something that happened overnight. It was a journey, one that took time, patience, and practice. As weeks turned into months, Sarah's confidence grew. She no longer feared making mistakes. She realized that every mistake brought her one step closer to her goal. And slowly but surely, her English began to improve. As months passed, Sarah's English continued to improve. She was no longer afraid to speak, and she even started to enjoy conversations in English. However, she knew that to become fluent, she needed to go beyond just practicing with people in her town. She needed to challenge herself. One day, Sarah heard about an English conversation club in the city. It was a place where people from all over the world came together to practice speaking English. Sarah was excited but also nervous. The city was far, and she had never been to such a big gathering before. But Sarah remembered her promise to herself. She would not let fear stop her from becoming fluent. She packed her bag, took a bus, and arrived at the conversation club. As soon as she walked in, she saw people from many different countries. Some spoke English very well, while others were still learning, just like her. She took a deep breath and joined a group. They were discussing various topics: food, travel, books, and hobbies. Sarah listened carefully, and when it was her turn to speak, she hesitated for a moment. But then she remembered all the practice she had done, all the mistakes she had learned from. She began to speak. At first, her sentences were simple. "I like reading books," she said. "I want to travel to many places." The more she spoke, the more confident she became. People in the group were friendly, and they helped her when she didn't know a word. It was the perfect place to improve her skills. Over the next few weeks, Sarah returned to the club regularly. She talked about different topics, from her favorite foods to the places she wanted to visit. The conversations became easier, and she found herself speaking more naturally. She didn't need to think so much before saying something. Words began to flow. But Sarah knew that fluency wasn't just about speaking, it was also about thinking in English. So she started another habit. She began thinking in English throughout her day. When she woke up, she would say to herself, "It's time to get out of bed." When she cooked breakfast, she would think, "I am making eggs today." She even dreamed in English sometimes. One day, Sarah received a message from an old friend who had moved to Australia. Her friend invited her to visit. Sarah had always wanted to travel, and now she had the perfect opportunity. The only thing that worried her was speaking English in a foreign country. Would she be able to communicate with native speakers? She decided to go for it. "This is my chance," she thought. "If I want to be fluent, I have to push myself." When Sarah arrived in Australia, she was amazed by how different everything was. But what amazed her even more was how well she could communicate. She spoke with people at the airport, asked for directions, and even had conversations with the locals. At first, it was a little difficult because native speakers talked quickly. But Sarah soon realized that she could understand most of what they said. And when she didn't understand, she asked them to slow down or repeat. During her trip, Sarah visited many beautiful places and met people from all over the world. She stayed in hostels, where she shared rooms with other travelers. Every night, they sat together and talked in English. Some were native speakers, and others were learners like her. Each conversation helped her grow more confident. By the end of her trip, something incredible happened. Sarah realized that she was no longer afraid to speak English. She didn't worry about making mistakes anymore. She could have long conversations without thinking too much about the words. She was, finally, speaking fluently. When she returned home, her family and friends noticed the difference. Sarah spoke English with ease, and she even started helping others in her town who wanted to learn. She joined the local school as an English tutor, teaching children and adults how to speak with confidence. Sarah had achieved her dream. She knew that learning a language is not about being perfect. It's about practice, patience, and never giving up. Her journey wasn't easy, but it was worth every step. Now, Sarah could travel the world, make new friends, and experience life in a way she had always dreamed of, all because she learned to speak English fluently. And so, Sarah's story became an inspiration to others who wanted to learn English. She often told them, "Don't be afraid of mistakes. Every mistake is a lesson." Keep listening, keep speaking, and one day you'll speak fluently too.